It was just another ordinary evening when I came home, expecting to relax after a long day at work. As I walked through the front door, I noticed the unusual silence that greeted me. There were no sounds of my daughter playing in the living room, or the familiar hum of the TV. Instead, I was met with the sight of all my belongings piled high on the front lawn, each item seemingly marked with a painful reminder of what I was about to lose. My heart skipped a beat. The house that once felt like a home now felt foreign, cold, and unforgiving. My daughter Mia was sitting on the porch, her face buried in her phone, her eyes red from crying. As I approached, she looked up at me, holding out her phone with shaking hands. I looked at the screen, my heart sinking into my stomach. There it was, a video. It was of me and my boss, Mark, in a compromising position, a moment I foolishly thought was a private affair. But there it was, clear as day, playing on my daughter's phone. A classmate of Mia's had shared the video with her. My blood ran cold as I realized what I had done. The shame, the guilt, and the regret all hit me like a tidal wave. Mia's voice trembled as she spoke through her tears. "Mom, I'm staying with Dad. You need to leave." The words hit me harder than the video ever could. My world was shattering around me, and all I could do was stand there, unable to move, unable to comprehend the reality of it all. I tried to speak, but my voice faltered, lost in the overwhelming shame of my own betrayal. Mia didn't want to listen. She was done, and I couldn't blame her. With a shaking hand, she handed me the divorce papers. My fingers numbed as I took them, my mind struggling to process everything that had just happened. How had it come to this? I stood frozen, the divorce papers clutched tightly in my hands. The realization that I'd lost everything, including my daughter's trust, was more painful than any punishment I could face. I stumbled into our bedroom, my mind reeling with the shock of what had just happened. The weight of the divorce papers in my hand felt heavier with every step I took. I could barely hear the faint sound of my daughter's sobs from outside. I had destroyed everything: my marriage, my family, and my own self-respect. But it wasn't until I entered the bedroom that I truly understood the magnitude of the mess I had made. The sight that awaited me was beyond anything I could have imagined. The room was dark, the blinds pulled tightly shut, as if even the sunlight wanted to stay away from the pain. But it wasn't the darkness that made me freeze in my tracks. It was the sight of my husband's revenge. On the bed, a laptop was open, and as I walked closer, I saw a video playing. It was a video of me. A video I'd never seen, but one that was clearly meant for me to find. The betrayal wasn't just captured in the video shared by my daughter's classmate. It was in the calculated way my husband had planned his revenge. The video was of me, of all the moments where I had thought I could keep my affair with Mark a secret. But now it was all out in the open. Every whisper, every stolen kiss, every lie was on display for me to watch, to absorb. It felt like watching my own downfall on repeat. But the worst part? The video was compiled with footage of the times I had promised my husband I was faithful, of the moments I had kissed him goodbye and told him I loved him, only to betray those words with my actions. It was a cold, ruthless editing job, one that showcased the entire span of my betrayal. From the very first time I had been unfaithful to Mark, to the last time I had lied to my husband and told him I was working late. The final clip hit me like a punch in the gut. There, at the end of the video was a message from my husband. A simple text flashed across the screen. "This is what you've done to us. You'll never forget this." I collapsed to my knees, my body trembling with the weight of the reality I had to face. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the end of everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and loyalty. I sat there, numb, staring at the screen as the final images of my betrayal played over and over in my mind. The reality of what my husband had done hit me like a truck. He had orchestrated this. Every single detail was calculated. The video was his revenge, his way of showing me exactly what I had lost and the depth of the pain I had caused. He had used my own actions against me, and I couldn't escape it. As I sat on the floor, the sound of my daughter's crying outside slowly faded into the background, replaced by the deafening silence of the room. The world outside was still turning, but in my mind, everything had stopped. I was trapped in my own guilt, my own shame. I heard the door open behind me, and I knew it was him. My heart skipped a beat as I slowly turned around, bracing myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. My husband, Michael, stood there in the doorway. His face was unreadable, his eyes cold, harder than I had ever seen them. The man who had once been my partner, my confidant, was now a stranger. And in that moment, I realized how deeply I had hurt him. You were always so careful, so sure you could keep it all hidden," he said, his voice steady but laced with a quiet fury. "I never thought it would come to this, but I gave you everything, didn't I? And this is what you did in return." I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me, suffocating me. "Michael, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I was weak, and I—" "You were weak?" His voice cracked with anger, but there was a deeper pain hidden beneath it. "Do you think I didn't notice?" I saw the signs. I just didn't want to believe them. He stepped into the room, closing the door softly behind him. "You think this video is my revenge?" "No, Emma, this is just the beginning. You destroyed this family. And now you'll have to live with that." I wanted to argue, to beg for forgiveness, but the look in his eyes made it clear that there was nothing left to say. He was done. I was done. Everything we had built was now gone, and all that remained was the wreckage of a broken family. "Where are you going to go, Emma?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost as if he was trying to understand how it had come to this. "Because you're not staying here." I couldn't speak. The weight of everything, the affair, the lies, the pain I had caused my daughter, was too much to bear. All I could do was shake my head. I had no answers. I had nothing left to give. Michael turned away, not even sparing me a glance as he walked toward the door. "Take your stuff and leave. I'll make sure everything's taken care of. But don't expect me to fight for you. I'm not going to pretend everything's okay." And with that, he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, and I was left alone in the silence, in the mess of my own choices. I didn't even know what to do next. The one person I thought I could always rely on had turned his back on me, and now I was left with nothing but the remnants of my own mistakes. The days that followed were a blur. I moved out of the house, my once warm home now cold and unfamiliar. I stayed at a friend's apartment, somewhere far from the life I had once known, the life I had destroyed. I tried to contact Michael, but each message went unanswered. It was as if the finality of our marriage had been sealed in that moment, when I watched my own actions unfold in front of me on that screen. I didn't have the strength to face anyone, not even my own daughter. I couldn't even look at her without feeling the guilt weigh me down. She had seen it all. The video, the lies. She had seen me, her mother, caught in the worst possible light. And for what? A moment of weakness that had spiraled out of control. A moment that had cost me everything. I thought about my daughter every waking moment. The way she handed me the divorce papers, her tear-streaked face, the finality in her eyes when she said, "I'm staying with Dad." How could I ever make up for what I'd done? How could I repair the trust I had shattered? I tried to reach out to her, but she refused to take my calls. She stayed with Michael, and I could hear the resentment in her voice every time I spoke to her. It was heartbreaking, knowing that I had pushed her away in the worst way possible. One evening, after a particularly long day of just sitting in silence, I received an email from an unknown address. It was a single sentence. "Your punishment has just begun." The words hit me like a slap to the face, and I knew instantly that it was Michael, or someone close to him, reminding me of the consequences of my actions. The video had gone viral. My betrayal was now public, and there was no way to undo the damage. I had always been the one to control the narrative. As a journalist, I knew how to craft a story, how to twist facts and opinions to my advantage. But now, I was the story, and there was nothing I could do to spin it in my favor. The media had picked up the video, and every day I saw new headlines, new articles about the cheating wife of a well-known businessman. The shame was unbearable. People looked at me like I was a stranger, a woman they no longer recognized. And I couldn't blame them. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I had been living in that small apartment for weeks now. The silence was deafening. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock on the wall. But beyond that, nothing. The world outside had moved on. But I was still stuck in that same moment. The moment I had been exposed for the person I truly was. I couldn't stop thinking about Michael. I couldn't stop thinking about how he had found out, how the video had been shared. Had it really been his revenge, or was it just a cruel twist of fate? My heart sank as I realized the depth of my mistake. I had betrayed the one person who had loved me unconditionally. But it wasn't just Michael. I had lost my daughter, my home, my career, everything I thought I had built. The once promising future now felt like a distant memory. It was all gone. One morning, a week after I had received that cryptic email, I found a letter on my doorstep. It was from Michael. My hands shook as I tore open the envelope, my heart pounding in my chest. The letter was brief, but to the point. "I hope this message reaches you at a time when you are ready to face what you've done. I wanted you to know that I'm doing everything I can to protect our daughter. She doesn't need to be caught in the middle of this. But you will never be forgiven for what you did. The damage you've caused can never be undone." The words hit me harder than the video, harder than the gossip, harder than anything I had felt in weeks. He was right. There was no going back. I had destroyed everything, and now I was facing the consequences. I sank to my knees in the small, empty apartment, the weight of his words crashing down on me. I was alone, completely alone. No amount of apologizing could undo the damage I had caused. I had betrayed Michael, I had betrayed my daughter, and I had betrayed myself. Days blurred into each other. I spent most of my time staring out the window, my mind a constant whirlwind of regret and pain. Michael's words echoed in my head, a constant reminder of my actions. He had told me the damage was done, that there was no going back. But as much as I wanted to fight for some redemption, I knew it was over. The destruction I had caused was irreversible. One evening, I received another unexpected visit, this time from my daughter, Emily. She had been staying with Michael, adjusting to life without me. She wasn't the same vibrant, carefree girl I once knew. There was a sadness in her eyes, a bitterness that cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. The fact that she had seen the video, had been exposed to that side of me, was something I would never forgive myself for. She stood there in the doorway, her expression cold. "I don't want to see you like this anymore," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "I can't look to you the same way. I've never been so embarrassed." I opened my mouth to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. What could I say? How could I apologize for this? She continued, her gaze unwavering. "I know what you did. I saw the video. Everyone saw it. And it hurts, Mom. It hurts that you could betray Dad like that. I don't even know who you are anymore." The pain of hearing those words felt like a physical blow. I had lost her. Not just the image of a perfect mother in her eyes, but any chance of ever rebuilding that bond. I could feel my heart shattering in my chest. She was right. I had destroyed everything. Emily walked past me without saying another word. She didn't even look back as she left the apartment, the door shutting quietly behind her. And in that silence, I realized there was no coming back from this. I had lost my family, my dignity, my self-respect. There was nothing left to fight for. But just as I thought I might give up, my phone buzzed. It was an alert. I opened it hesitantly, unsure of what I'd find. It was a notification from the video that had gone viral. The caption read, "The truth always finds its way to the surface. You will never escape your past." My stomach turned as I read the words. I had no idea who had posted it, but it felt like yet another form of punishment. It wasn't over. No, the public humiliation was far from over. The video had gone viral, spreading like wildfire across social media. My face was everywhere. The comments, the memes, the ridicule. It was impossible to escape. And now, there was nowhere to hide. As days passed, I became more and more aware of the reality I had to face. I had tried to run away from the consequences, to escape into denial, but everything was unraveling right before my eyes. The viral video continued to haunt me. Every time I picked up my phone, the notifications would come flooding in, reminders of the public shaming I was enduring. People had turned me into a joke, a cautionary tale, and no matter how hard I tried, there was no escaping the consequences of my actions. Michael had been quiet for days. The silence between us was unbearable, but I understood why. I had hurt him more deeply than anyone could ever understand. I had destroyed our family, betrayed his trust in the most intimate way possible. There was no fixing that. One night, after yet another long and sleepless evening of scrolling through my social media feeds, I decided to face him. It was time to have that conversation. The one that I had been avoiding. The truth was that I had nothing left. The house was no longer mine. The life I had built was gone, and I was about to lose my daughter for good. When I arrived at Michael's house, I saw him standing at the door, his face impassive, unreadable. I had no idea how he could still look at me, but there he was, as if waiting for me to say something. "Michael," I began, my voice shaky. I know I've ruined everything. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I regret what I did. Every moment of it. I'm so sorry for everything." He didn't say anything for a long time. His silence was heavier than any words he could have spoken. Finally, he sighed and looked at me with a mixture of hurt and resignation. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you," he said quietly. "What you did, it's not something I can just forget. You shattered our family, Emily's trust, everything. And I don't know how to rebuild that." Tears filled my eyes as I heard the weight of his words. I knew he was right. He had every right to feel this way. I had betrayed him in a way that was unforgivable. But I couldn't stop myself from wanting to make things right, even if it meant sacrificing everything I had left. "I'll do whatever it takes, Michael. I don't expect you to take me back, but I'll do anything to fix what's broken. I want to be a better person. For you, for Emily, for myself." He looked at me, his expression softening just slightly. "I don't know what to tell you, Carol. I can't promise you anything. You've hurt me too much." I nodded, knowing that no words could undo the damage I had caused. "I understand," I whispered. Then, after a long pause, he added, "But I do know one thing. You'll never be the person you were before. This has changed you, and I hope, for your sake, that it changes you for the better." With those final words, Michael turned away. I could feel the coldness of the space between us, the distance I had created that could never be bridged again. As I left Michael's house, the weight of his words stayed with me. They were like an anchor, dragging me deeper into the realization of what I had done. There would be no coming back from this. I could try to repair things, but some wounds are just too deep to heal. It was clear to me now that my actions had consequences far beyond my understanding. Emily, my daughter, had suffered the most. She had to bear witness to the destruction of her family, and she would never see me the same way again. That truth hurt more than any betrayal I could ever feel. My betrayal had robbed her of her childhood security, her trust in me, and the love of the man who had always been her rock. I spent the next few days trying to figure out how to start over, but every step forward felt like a reminder of how far I had fallen. The world that had once revolved around me had crumbled, and there was nothing left but the shards of a broken life. As the days passed, I found myself at a crossroads. The viral video had exposed me to the world, leaving me vulnerable and humiliated. But in that humiliation, there was a strange sense of clarity. I had no more illusions, no more pretensions. The life I had built was gone, and it was time to rebuild, not as the woman I used to be, but as the person I needed to become. It would be a long road ahead. Regaining Emily's trust, finding redemption in my own eyes, and accepting the consequences of my choices would take years. But somewhere deep inside, I knew that if I could face this truth and learn from my mistakes, I might just be able to create something better from the wreckage. For now, I had no answers. But I had a newfound understanding of the power of honesty, the strength of family, and the deep consequences of betrayal. As I looked back at the life I had lost, I realized that the only way forward was to keep moving. It wasn't about winning back what I had lost. It was about being brave enough to change for the better. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough.